It was August 1962 when I first set foot in O'Donoghue's. A world of music, friends and booze opened up before me. I never could have guessed as I walked through the door just what the future had in store. A crossroads for my life I saw, lying there to taunt me.
While O'Donoghue's pub on Merrion Road, Dublin, is best known as a popular location for informal traditional music folk sessions, and is the birthplace of the world-famous Dubliners folk group, the very significant role it played in the emerging traditional music folk boom in the mid-20th century is not as well appreciated.
Well, in the merry month of May, now from me home I started, left the girls and two, I'm nearly broken hearted, saluted father dear, kissed me darling mother, drank a pint of beer, me grief and tears to smothered enough to reap the corn and leaf, for I was born, God a stout McThorn, a banished ghost and goblins, a brand new pair of brogues to rattle over the bogs and frighten all the dogs on the rocky road. It's a double of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to here and turn them down the rocky road, and all the ways to Dublin and Macfall. In Mullingar that night I rested limbs so weary, started by daylight next morning light, and there he took a drop of the pure to keep me heart and drink, and that's the Paddy's cure. When there is for drinking they hear the lassie smile, laughing all the while at me curious style to touch a heart above, and he asked me was I hired and wages I required till I was almost tired of the rocky road to Dublin and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hunt a hare and turn them down the rocky road all the way to Dublin and Macfall. In Dublin,
as large numbers of young people left rural Ireland to seek employment in Dublin, they brought with them their music and their regional styles. Seeking recluse from the loneliness of their B&Bs and bedsits, many found in O'Donoghue's an exciting melting pot. Here, the often competing values of urban and regional styles clashed. Just below the surface lurked the British, European and American folk sounds, as well as the emerging skiffle, R&B and classical influences. But these eventually morphed into a genre that fueled the national and international Irish traditional music revival and boom. When these apparently competing forces collided, a new musical landscape emerged, layered with seeds from divergent sources. Some of the iconic legendary musicians who were pivotal to that renaissance in O'Donoghue's have committed to telling this story. They include Johnny Moynihan, Sweeney's Men, Andy Irvine, Planxty, Finbar Furey, the Furey Brothers and Davy Arthur, and Paddy Keenan of the Bothy Band.
Johnny Moynihan in his fusty coat was the first to play there in Merrion Row. He brought the bouzouki to Ireland, you know. Way storm along, John.
Recently, I went to visit Johnny Moynihan and his partner Marion Cody in County Clare. Johnny plays at a local mountain music session every week, where he is still a musical force to be reckoned with. Over hot coffee and looking out over the beautiful Burren landscape and the wild Atlantic, Johnny relives those early days in O'Donoghue's. He enjoys recalling how Maureen O'Donoghue reprimanded him for having the audacity to play a tune on the tin whistle at a time when traditional music sessions in Irish pubs had not yet arrived.
The practice of the pubs was that they wouldn't allow any music, any singing. And I think the reason for that was that people were drinking and there was singing going on as well. That was a dangerous situation because they get inflamed a bit. That's, I think, the way it was put to me. But it was true that there was a lot of pubs that didn't have any singing or anything.
You sing us the night before Larry was stretched.
The night before Larry was stretched. The boys, they all paid him a visit. Bits in their sacks too they fetched. They sweated their duds till they writhed.
Johnny Moynihan is recognised as the first person to play music in O'Donoghue's. He would later introduce the bouzouki, a Greek instrument, into Irish folk music. Together with Andy Irvine, he co-founded Sweeney's Men, which broke the mould of Irish music and was seminal to the folk revival in Ireland in the 1960s. Andy Irvine is one of Ireland's most enduring and famous singer-songwriters, and also plays the mandolin, mandola, bouzouki, harmonica and hurdy-gurdy. He was a founder member of Sweeney's Men, Planksty and Patrick Street, and he also played with Dannon in 1976.
My memory is of playing there more in the afternoon than in the evening. You'd be sitting, if you were sitting in the back, you know, sometimes you'd be sitting at the counter in the front, and sometimes you'd have a table in the back with your friends. And somebody would get up and sing a song, and you'd all go quiet and listen and appreciate it and clap, and then go back to your conversation. And it might even be you that did it. Sometimes I would sing a song, or Johnny would sing a song.
Larry was ever the lad when a boy was condemned to the squeezer, would fence all the duds that he had to help his poor friend to a sneezer.
Johnny Moynihan was a legend in Dublin among musicians before I met him. I mean, he was spoken of in hushed tones, and Johnny Moynihan might be there. You know, I mean, he really was. I don't know how he attained that status. Johnny and myself became bosom companions. You know, it was extra. I think I was delighted to meet him. I also kind of had him on a pedestal a bit. Johnny was kind of the peak of idealism.
When one of us asked could he die without having duly repented, said, me ma, when I get home, the boys won't leave the girls alone. Pull me hair, stole me comb, but that's all right till I get home. She is handsome, she is pretty, she is the belle of Dublin City.
Into this eclectic melting pot came Ronnie Drew, adding a different and colourful ingredient with his powerful Dublin voice. His son Phelim picks up the story.
But what I do know is that the Dubliners grew out of the sessions in Donohue's. You know, there's a fabulous. It's as much a social document as anything else. But there's a lovely film called Donohue's Opera.
Sessions would tend to happen, turned into gigs. We got paid for it eventually. There's a great aborted film that you've probably heard of, O'Donoghue's Opera. I don't know when it started off. It wasn't exactly finished. The money for it dried up. There had been an attempt to make a film, in English, and I was offered the gig of playing the hero of the piece, but I wasn't talking to the people, to the musicians. They had. I saw it as a theatrical. They called it an encounter.
A hungry feeling came o'er me stealing. All the mice were squealing in my prison cell.
I had met Luke Kelly down here, actually, in a field. He came out of the church in Milgam. I remember I introduced Luke to Ronnie that night on the stairs of a pub, and introduced him to Ronnie, and they kind of became fairly in tune with each other, you know. Luke didn't hang about. He had a really good, strong voice and a strong approach. I know they were gathered in a clump at the back, the folkies were, and the two fiddle players were sitting down just inside the front window, you might say.
Jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal. The lags were...
You know, there's establishing shots at the beginning of the back room in O'Donoghue's, and you get a real sense of what O'Donoghue's would have been like in its heyday, with the Graham sisters, right. Johnny Moynihan, Seamus Heaney, Tony McMahon, Seamus Ennis was a very good friend of my mother and father.
Ted Furey brought his young son Finbar, then aged about 12, into O'Donoghue's at the very early stages of live sessions. Finbar was later joined by his brothers Eddie, Paul and George as regular visitors to the burgeoning sessions.
When first I saw the love light in your eye, I thought the world held not but joy for me.
Finbar recalls with fondness some of the characters and incidents that stuck out in his mind in those early enjoyable days, with a particular affection for Paddy and Maureen O'Donoghue.
He was great in the beginning. He wouldn't allow people in with long hair. Now that was Paddy, and Maureen as well. Now long hair was not taken. This was way back. You know, we had the Beatles hadn't long hair. Their hair was like as long as Wyatt now. You know, and but I remember he'd say, hide your hair, put it in the back of your coat. He says, right, two long-haired fellas tried to get through the door, I'm not going to let them get through. And they came to see you. And me and Eddie would hide the hair in the back, you know. Anyway, and that was the first thing. He gave us money to get a haircut. And we were going to Scotland, and we had to get a haircut.
Neil McDonough fondly remembers Finbar and Eddie Furey cooperating with Paddy in another long hair incident.
The one rule, though, is that you couldn't have long hair. That to a certain amount depends on who you were. You know, I was in there one afternoon with Eddie and Finbar Furey, you know, and their hair was very long. And Paddy came over to them and said to them, could you do me a favour and take a walk around the block? There's some people here I need to throw out. Who with long hair.
Well, Paddy and Maureen, very, very sound, though she liked to camp on the moral high ground. You had long hair, you were outward bound. Go down, you blood red roses. Ronnie Drew in his fine...
Jeez, he never left a man stuck. You know, I've seen fellas come in there and they wouldn't have the prize of a point. Paddy'd throw up a couple of points and say, no, I'll put you on a slate. But when you get your wages next time, bring the money back, you know, whatever. Or he'd throw you out if you were spending all your money, you know. He was a good man. He was a decent man. But he wouldn't let you make a fool of yourself. I mean, you had a family at home and we're running out of money. He wouldn't serve you. He'd say, no, come on, put the rest in your pocket, out here, you know. And then, like, it got crowded on the weekends, you know, with the music. And he had to start to say, enough is enough, you know. And he let the musicians in. If you played music, you were welcome. And if you were really a good player and he liked your company, he wouldn't charge you for a drink. Every second point.
Sing I brought you a jar of porter.
Oh, who's out there that's knocking the ditches down? Who's out there that's knocking the ditches down? Who's out there that's knocking the ditches down? Only meself says coon la dear, don't come any nearer me. Coon la dear, don't come any nearer me. Coon la dear, don't come any nearer me. Maybe I shouldn't says coon la.
Jerry McCartney on banjo, Clive Collins on fiddle, and Daggy Hunt on vocals, lashing out their version of Cúnla, a song first given by Joe Heaney to the Dubliners, probably in the back room. Jerry McCartney was drawn to Dublin by his first encounter with O'Donoghues in the early 60s. Jerry was playing banjo in the few traditional sessions that were emerging in Belfast at that time. He moved and settled well into the folk and bohemian atmosphere of O'Donoghue's back room, establishing himself as one of the regular anchor musicians. From the strategic vantage point of his stool, he was well placed to observe the eclectic characters, musicians and customers pouring through O'Donoghue's doors. And he had a deep fondness for Paddy and Maureen.
Both of them took me under their wing. And at one stage I was using O'Donoghue's as a bank because I was, you know, a young fella having a few pints, paying the rent and always short. So at the end of the day, I'd be maybe getting a couple of pints on strap and things like that there, which is the dumb thing in those days. But I says, Paddy, let's have a raise. I give you my paycheck and I'll take it off that. So that worked for about 18 months. And Paddy would say, like, I was always in the red, like, you know, but as it was a floating check, like, we always sort of squared up. And Maureen, she looked at us, she said, you're not putting on any weight. I can't understand that. Well, the pants were going down my neck at the time. But she says, go in the back. On your lunch break from work, go into the back and help yourself to a sandwich and soup and sandwich and thing. So that was me for the last 2 years in Donoghue.
Oh, who's that there that's tickling the ties me? Who's that there that's tickling the ties me? Who's that there that's tickling the ties me? Only meself is coon la dear, don't come any nearer me. Coon la dear, don't come any nearer me. Coon la dear, don't come any nearer me. Maybe I shouldn't is coon la.
So, and I know that Ronnie always said that that she wouldn't let anybody who she knew had been drinking too much have a pint first thing in the day, unless they had something to eat first. So she was very good in that respect, looking out for the welfare of her drunks.
I'll tell you the reason for me downfall. Women. Oh, women as angels without any wings, till they are very peculiar things. When little woman gets married, you know, she wants to be boss of the show.
Liz Gillis is an historian and author and is from the Liberties in Dublin. She is the author of 6 books, including Women of the Irish Revolution. Liz is also an expert social historian with an acute perspective on the role of women in Irish society.
Well, women weren't seen in pubs. That's a huge thing. Women just weren't seen in pubs. There's loads of women musicians, but a woman's place is in the home, but pubs are not seen. Pubs are not places where women are seen, and a certain type of woman would go to a pub, if you know what I mean.
Right, yeah.
And even the pubs that did allow women, they were separated. Like, you'd have a few pubs, very few pubs still have the snug. If the women did go in, that was their little space. It's sort of separate from the men outside, yeah. And even the way they drank. Like, it was a half a Guinness and stuff, you know. It was just, like, you can imagine this today. Like, one, you're not allowed in, and if you are allowed in, this is the size of the bloody drink you're allowed to have, like. So, if the space isn't there for the women.
Wise men say there are 3 women to every man. Then tell me, why do some men stay single all their lives? 3 women to every man. Say if you can. Why can't every man have 3 wives?
In the beginning was more a social place where one would meet new people and who became old friends very quickly. My memory is of playing there more in the afternoon than in the evening. You'd be sitting, if you were sitting in the back, you know, sometimes you'd be sitting at the counter in the front, and sometimes you'd have a table in the back with your friends. And somebody would get up and sing a song, and you'd all go quiet and listen and appreciate it and clap, and then go back to your conversation. And it might even be you that did it.
Neil MacDonagh recalls some of the musicians who frequented O'Donoghue's at that time.
Finbar would bring in his pipes and all these things that all these people who were no longer in O'Donoghue's. Tommy Peebles is one that I think about. Mm-hmm. And I remember one time he was playing a tune, and Clive Collins, who was another fiddle player, stood looking over his shoulder, and at the end of the of the tune, he sat down, said to me, I was looking to try and figure out how he does what he does, but I'm still none the wiser. And of course there was Seamus Ennis every now and then. I remember there was a week or two or three or maybe more, when every time you went in the weeknight, there was Seamus along with Ted Furey. And in particular, I remember the two of them both playing fiddles. Now, whoever heard of Seamus Ennis playing a fiddle? But he was there playing it. And then there was times that Ted would play on Seamus's pipes and Seamus playing Ted's fiddle.
Joe Ryan and John Kelly in the front bar, their figures are from the County Clare. Joe Heaney sings in the cold night air, in the rainway after closing.
Oh, Johnny Beggan, of course. And he was a member of the Battering Ram, which is a well-known band with Decky Hunt. But you never knew who was going to come in. There was a guy, Christy Gagan, who sang all his own songs. Half of them were written to the tune of the Battle Hymns of the Republic. Ted McKenna Rocky wrote to Dublin, 1960. I think they say 66, but it was actually recorded about 64. Yeah, and they were always very nice to me. If I was there during the day, my dog would be with me, and Maureen would get a bone out to give him to chew on. Until one day it was time to go and said, "Come on, Boney." And he stood up and a table full of drinks went over. So he was never welcome again.
Neil MacDonagh is the son of Donald MacDonagh, broadcaster and a significant figure in Irish literary and legal worlds. His father, Thomas MacDonagh, was a prominent Irish poet and leader of the 1916 Easter Rising.
In Dublin City in 1913, the boss was boss and he employed a slave. The woman worked and the child was hungry when Larkin came like a towering wave.
Ted McKenna was my best man when I got married. Mm-hmm. And I wrote the sleeve note, the notes of the songs, at least for their album. And they were over the house, where I lived every now and then, because we'd a storehouse of books and records. One time I pulled out something called Let Freedom Ring. In 1963, the Dublin Congress of Trade Unions, I'd never known that existed before, but doing some research, I found it. They asked my dad to write something to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the lockout. So what they ended up doing was they rented the Olympia Theatre of it. My dad had written a verse or two here and there. It's known today as the Ballad of Larkin and Connolly. Back then we called it in Dublin City. So I sat down and wrote a couple of verses to it. And the first ever performance of the song by Ted was a tribute to my dad in the Abbey Theatre in January of 1968.
8 months we fought and 8 months we starved. We followed Larkin through thick and thin. But foodless homes and crying children, they broke our hearts and we could not win. Then he left us, we seemed defeated. The night was dark for our workless men. But Connolly rose with new hope and counsel and gave the slogan, "We'll rise again." In Dublin City in 1960, the British Army, they burnt the town. They shelled the city, they took the leaders, the heart was shattered beneath the crown. They They shot McDermott and Pearce and Plunkett. They shot MacDonagh and Clark the Brave. From bleak Kilmaine and they took Cansbaldy to Arbor Hill, to a quicklime grave. But last of all of the 7 captains, a dying man they shot Condé. The voice of labour, the voice of justice, who gave his life that men might
be free. Join us shortly for part 2 of the O'Donoghue's story.
It was August 1962 when I first set foot in O'Donoghue's, a world of music, friends and booze hastening towards me. I never could have guessed as I walked through the door just what the future had in store. A blueprint for my life I saw lying there before me.
This programme was co-funded by Comisiún na Man with the television licence fee.
It was August 1962 when I first set foot in O'Donoghue's, a world of music, friends and booze opened up before me. I never could have guessed as I walked through the door just what the future had in store. A crossroads for my life I saw lying there to taunt me.
Welcome back to the O'Donoghue's story. In this episode, we continue our journey through the pub's remarkable role in the Irish traditional music revival of the 1950s and beyond. Pub sessions first sprang up in London in the years after World War II, and then found their way across the Irish Sea to O'Donoghue's pub in Dublin initially. Peter Woods, documentary filmmaker and social historian, was a keen observer of the birth of pub sessions.
And Johnny Moynihan came in, and he came into the pub with a bicycle, and he had the mandolin and a concert and a melodeon on the back of the bicycle, and he had the long hair and everything, and he got barred. And he said, I think I got barred in O'Donoghue's, he said, in the late 1950s for having long hair. And I think that had been the start of this here, I think, and into the early 60s, and that is well recorded, the Dubliners and everything else that came out of this place, and you'd be very aware of that when you're in it, looking round at it. But it was also probably the first pub in Dublin that had traditional or folk music maybe in it, whereas already by that stage in the world I'd be interested in London, that had already happened in the Devonshire Arms up in Camden Town. Well, as far as we know, that it originated in London, and you can see why, like, people would have been reluctant. They wouldn't have been allowed to play music in the houses that they were in, or the lodging houses they were in, and music in London it was probably the first place like that. It became about community in a wider sense, whereas music might have been about community in the locality you were listening to, and you grew up in, and there might be house dances and there might be all of that sort of stuff going on. But when you went to London, the community became about, like, whatever part of the country you were from, not your locality, became wider than that. And so you had musicians coming from different parts of the country playing in pubs in London together, and that's what happened in this place as well, to an extent. Like the same thing that happened in London. They say the Devonshire Arms grew out of either the first landlord at the time was either from Tubbercurry or Gurchin, from somewhere in that region of Sligo, and he loved Sligo North Connacht music, as it's often classed now, but the Sligo fiddle tradition certainly. But when he'd have been playing in there, like you'd have been talking about marching, Byrnes played there, Ennis played there, lots of different musicians were bringing out different ideas of music, and that's what happened here as well.
The Fox one doesn't.
Could we get that one again? Yeah. With the bear on and
just give us the.
A group of musicians met to reminisce in the back room, recalling the music making, crack and shenanigans of those early halcyon days.
We're not paying enough to do that.
Uilleann piper Paddy Keenan recalls early days making music with his brother Johnny.
Through the 70s and 80s, my brother Johnny, he was really the cornerstone. He was the forever thing.
Johnny banjo player.
Yeah, but oh God, man, we had some fun here though in the 70s.
Was the back room or the front room?
We were always in here. This is it was after I left that they moved Johnny and Martin Denning in the front. It used to be who were the two lads in the front?
Frank.
But, who were the two lads in the front? The two, John Kelly and who? Ryan, was it?
Joe Ryan.
And John Kelly.
They played Friday next time.
That was their spot, yeah.
Actually.
There was Noel Carroll with me. There was I don't know if people remember Noel Carroll.
Yeah, dude.
And,
Big Noel.
Yeah.
Guitar.
Yeah, and there was Jem Kelly was another lad. He worked in that carpet shop on Thomas Street, and he was the one that did all the old songs. But there was Frank Giles.
Yeah.
And
Ted McKenna.
Banjo and fiddle player Frank the Moose McNamara was always up for a bit of crack.
In the back here we have, just going back to about 1969, 1970, Tommy Peoples was sitting here, Decky was sitting here, Mick McCown was there. We were playing a few tunes, and we were going to fed up, but there was no drink or whatever. They weren't taking out the drink at the time. Decky decided, he says, we'll play the centenary march, which we should probably do today.
Yeah.
But this time we won't do it. We did it. Last time we walked out, you know the tune, dan 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 dan. Another tune, the centenary march. Tommy was playing out the front. Mick McCowan had a drum. He was after getting two dustbin heads outside. Walked down as far as Towners, across over to Nesbitt's, back up and back in, still playing the same tune. I started picking up a few chords, and I went up to a fella in Sundrive Road. His name was Johnny Fox, but he was teaching the banjo, but he was teaching in the CGDA, which is the high tuning. So I started learning the tunes in CGDA. I went down to the table, Barney McKenna, and said, "Here, I want that." The high rail, I want to play that, whatever it was. But he said to me, he said, "That's easy enough." But he was all bar chords because it was all different tuning. It was because Barney, he was the one that, he was the one that invented that thing, changing it down to. He was attributed to dropping it down. Barney McKenna came up with that idea of dropping down the thing from CGDA. That's the way it was done by the book. That's the way your man was teaching me. Seán Keane, fiddle player, went to the same guy. And he was a very, very good teacher, but he didn't know anything about traditional music. And I came in and said, "I come in here now." I said, "I have a good time in here." I showed them all how to play the banjo.
Banjo player Jerry McCartney also credits Barney McKenna with this innovative retuning of the instrument.
Barney was a much more traditional style, and the other thing I heard about this is Kieran Hanrahan, the ex of Stockman's Wings, very, very, very good friend, and he was saying that Barney himself was instrumental in changing the tuning of the banjo to suit Irish music. But the banjo used to be the tenor banjo used to have the main tuning was C, G, D, A, but it didn't suit Irish music, completely foreign. So Barney says, well, let's see if I tune the thing down to G, D, A, E, like a fiddle, except a couple of octaves lower, and one or two, I'm not sure about that. But anyway, all of a sudden it's like a hand fitting in the glove. It just suited it and took off, and there's very few people tune the old jazz thing for Irish music now. It's all sort of GDA. So and that was Barney McKenna.
Follow that, folks. Let's hear for Barney and the banjo.
'twas on the Whitsun Wednesday, the 14th day of May.
Tommy Chambers recalls how O'Donoghue's had a profound effect on his life.
The first time I came in here really was probably 1969, I'd say. Maybe I may have come in and walked out again. You know, walked through, didn't know anybody here. But then I went to the Fleadh in Cashel in 1969, and because of that I met Ted Furey there. And I knew that, I was interested in the bar going back to Seán Keane and all that sort of stuff, you know, I really loved the sound of it. And then somebody said he makes bar-ons, and I said, right, okay. So I said to Ted, I said, look, I said, will you make me a bar-on? He said, I will. And he said, and I said, okay, well, when will I get it off you? He said, you come into Donoghue's, he says, I'll have it for you, he says, in 2 weeks' time. 2 weeks' time. So I came into Donoghue's, and I was in and packed outside there, the whole lot of, and I walked around. Next thing, got tapped in the back. I have your bar-on, he said. And that was it. I got the bar-on. And then, do you know what I intend to do with the bar-on? You might say I should have done it. I hang it up on the wall at home and leave it there, you know. But anyway, but that was the way it was. But anyway, then somebody approached me then and said, there's a party on, will you bring the bar-on with you? And I said, but I can't play it. He said, it doesn't matter, they won't know. He says, you just make it, you just keep the time and blah, blah, blah. And that's how I started playing. And it originally started in 1969. Then I started coming in here a bit and so forth. And I never really played in here in 1969, but 1970 then I started coming in.
I'll cut off all my yellow hair, men's clothing I'll put on, and I'll go along with you and be your waiting man.
This is where I saw Doreen, my wife, to be years later, and she was sitting just there. And I just looked up. I actually, the one that was sitting beside her, I had gone out with her. I hope this is so. But I always thought about it, because that's where I first laid eyes on her, you know, just sitting there, where Frank is.
I think I was here that night.
She sat on my knee one night in here.
Hey, there's children listening to this programme now, be careful.
Hold on. She sat on my knee. And Paddy Keenan walked out and said, that's not allowed in here, he said. You're sitting over there, actually. And I said, well, what's not allowed? You can't sit, he said, you can't have women sitting on your knees. So he said, you're barred. I was barred. But Doreen was okay.
If I should meet that pretty young girl that's proper, tall and gay, if I should take a fancy to her, Nancy, what would you say?
Paddy O'Donoghue kept a watchful eye on the ebullient Tom Mulligan, owner of the Cobblestone pub in Smithfield.
I was here with a girl and she was going off to Australia. And she was a lovely girl and I had great feelings for her. I never saw her since, but anyway. We had a hug and an embrace, and who's come over out. Took the two full pints back again. That was it. And I was broke as well as girlfriend lesson after that. She was all right. But anyway, I came back in later on, about maybe a year later, and I got fired again from your hair was touching me shirt collar. But we had great times now, we had great times here, and we even did the Holy Hour once or twice. And got fed by Maureen when Joe Heaney was here. You know, so it was lovely, you know, it was great.
Your father played in here, didn't he?
He did indeed, he stood on with Neely here, yeah.
That man on the left in the photograph is Bill Hart, the great accordion player.
That's Bill Hart.
He used to play with Sonny Brogan and my father in the old Church Street Club, where I first learned the tin whistle. And that was late, it'd be about mid-60s. So, and he'd come over here, and John Kelly then, the great fiddle player and concertina player, Kyo Tori Cool, and He used to play here with Joe Ryan down in that corner.
I remember them on a Friday nights in particular.
And a Saturday.
Yeah, brilliant, yeah.
And there's myself as well. So that'll be going back, I'd say, to around 1970, I'd say. Particularly when Joe Heaney was here, you know.
Was your father very friendly with Joe?
He was, yeah. And we come over here and spend the full Saturday here with Joe every day.
Oh.
Every time he came over from Seattle or New York, wherever he was, particularly from Seattle in the latter years, you know. And we'd spend the whole day and people would be coming in to meet Joe as well. So
Neely Mulligan, one of Ireland's leading uilleann pipers, benefited enormously from rubbing musical shoulders with some of Ireland's great singers and musicians in O'Donoghue's.
O Fader
you know, you'd have marching Byrnes and all these guys.
Did you play with marching?
Oh yeah, played real marching.
Well, legend.
You had these fellas popping in from time to time, and
the young lad was sitting there.
Sure, it was an education, the whole thing, you know.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
We even got the old bit of grub here and all. Put it up on the counter here, come down from up above, got it all cooked, you know. I think it was 2:30 to 4 o'clock or something like that. Very, very nice people, you know. And we often went up there, and eventually they put a bar up there in the next floor. It was a great place. If you didn't, the music was down here, but you could go up there and have a quieter pint or whatever, yeah. The second one is, that was taken the day Joseph O'Haney was buried in Carna in Connemara, the 9th of May in 1984. Really? In Moynihan's graveyard outside Carna. And of course this was Joe's base when he came over from America, and he spent his time here. And we did concerts with Joe, which were organised by Gaeling over in the Damer Hall here in Stephen's Green, you know. And I remember at the time I was drinking a pint of shandy, and it was Joe says, "What are you drinking that stuff for?" Like, "I'll buy you a right pint," and he bought me my first pint of Guinness. But then, when he'd be doing the concert up in the Damer Hall, he got the nearest pub, Sinnott's. We used to go there before the concert.
Remember Sinnott's?
And he'd get a big crucible that height, fill it full of porter, and put it on the stage with a load of half-pint glasses for myself and my father. Johnny Colwake, the Seán Keane writer from back in Injul direction. And you'd have Srina Mairead O'Gonnell, and you'd have Tom Faddy McDermott at Seán Keane, who was looking after Dunsink Observatory here in Dublin.
Really, yeah.
And he was fantastic. He'd tell, "We fado, so fado we." You know, there was a man on a long, long time ago, and his stories, and everybody that was in the audience were nearly Irish speakers in that Damer Hall. It held something like over 200 people. And it was an amazing night. And you have that and Joe would sing between ourselves playing a few tunes, or the Seán Keane or the Johnny Colwake telling stories and pieces of poetry or whatever, you know. I was sitting beside Joseph O'Haney all the time when I was on the stage, and I was sitting here beside him. And I knew Seán O'Donoghue as well back in Carna, or back in Connemara as well. So you were sitting beside channel singers. So it had to rub off, you know.
It was seeping in where you wanted to or not.
Brilliant. And we knew Nicholas Tobin as well. We used to go down there on Ryan, and Tom Faddy and Tom and Andrew. And when we were learning Irish as kids, he was the local channel singer. And we went to play music in Spittle, you know. So that was at the weekends. My father would come down. He'd come down every weekend and bring us in to play music into Hughes's and on Crushkin Long. And Tom Faddy Tom would be in there, and Paddy Bonner Bryn, Festy Conlon, all those guys were back there for wonderful times, you know. You couldn't play music in the pubs in Dublin, and this is the first pub in Dublin where you could hear traditional music in the 1960s. Because the musicians were told it was peasant music before that. The publicans didn't want to have any traditional music. And that's why you had the music clubs around Dublin, like the Thomas Street Club. And so if you wanted to play music in those days, and when my father was here in the 40s and 50s and 60s, before this
The boom, if you like. For want of a better word, It was those clubs, and then suddenly this is so. It turned out to be a magnet for young lads like us, and come over here. Even when my father wasn't with me, and come over here for a few pints, have a whistle in my pocket or something, you know. Play
and I wasn't playing them, but I was attracted to it. I was listening, and I was getting the interest.
It was like a mecca for Irish music and musicians, you know. And people mightn't understand that, but you couldn't play music anywhere else. And it kind of public started to realise with the popularity of the Dubliners and the Clancy brothers, they all came in here and Trussell and all, and they were attracting famous people into O'Donoghue's.
Like Ronnie Drew, this was always a place art students went because the art college was around the corner, and Ronnie Drew was hanging around with students, and he was a flamenco guitar player. I could play a flamenco guitar and tell great stories.
Derry girl Ann Diver was an art student in Dublin in 1971.
It was down by Christchurch that I first met with Annie, a neat little girl and not a bit shy.
So when I went to art college in September 71, I came down here because I heard this was where you heard the Irish music.
Who was playing when you came in here? Can you remember?
Barney McKenna was always here. A lot of the Dubliners dropped in, different ones. The unfortunate thing is, back in the day, you didn't ask people's name. You know, they just were playing. It was brilliant music.
But you knew them anyway.
Oh, I knew them, yes. Yeah.
And then the Keenans, you met up with
I met,
Keenans.
Yeah, in 1972. My friend Dermot took me out to Paddy Keenan's house. We heard all the Keenans playing, Brenton and Thomas and Paddy, of course. And the father, John Keenan, played the Dorn recording for us.
Oh, the Johnny Dorn tape.
The Johnny Dorn recording.
Before it was published.
Before it was ever heard of, he had a copy of it. So we heard.
Magical listening to that.
We were blown away.
And then other people started coming in, which is obviously Barney McKenna, who revolutionised our ideas of banjo playing. Luke Kelly came back from London to come into this place in the early 60s. So it was the same like cross-fertilisation of ideas. Earlier, Neely was talking about the time that Seamus Ennis would come back here and his father would bring them up to hear Seamus Ennis. Paddy Keenan, the great Shannon singer, he told me similar stories about when he was in teacher training in Dublin, coming up here to see Sean O'Connor singing in here, to see the first time he ever met Joe Heaney singing it in here, and he stood at the back and looked at him and just in awe.
Oh, Father,
I remember meeting Judy Felix in here. Do you remember her?
Really? Yeah, of course.
And people like that, you know. And Gareth de Bruyne will come in here.
Gareth, I remember Gareth. You introduced me to Gareth. Brilliant man,
so they were all, it was all a buzz time for because before that you were treated with contempt if we played Irish music, you know. So it was a great outlet for us to come here, play music, and down the country you could play down there, you know. But there was a problem in Dublin. They didn't want peasant gob music and peasant music, and they had all sorts of names, the diddly eye and everything, you know.
And it was a lovely time to be alive. Like I was young enough to appreciate what was going on, and I had this deep love for the music, and because it was such a wide spectrum of music covered there, I just learned to appreciate the different styles and the different types of music and musicians. It's great. I haven't had a bad life, you know, but I always look on that. The memories I have from Donoghue's are just some of the best I've ever had in my life. Just look at it as pure pleasure. And it was great for it while it lasted. Like I couldn't go back to it now. I'd be dead within a week anyway.
This place was the first place in this country where music was played like that, and for an awful lot of Irish people, regardless of what they feel about music, they at least encountered music, traditional music, in something like its context in this place and in places like this. And that's why it's very important.
In a way, I don't know who's made me as a person, like, you know, because I was always kind of shy, and inclined towards introversion. But I met so many wonderful people who, and largely from O'Donoghue's, that it brought me out of myself, and I became a different person, and I enjoyed being that person very, very much. I wouldn't have, that, you could say, happiest days of my life, almost.
There you are. Have yous no homes to go to?
The O'Donoghue's story. With credits to O'Donoghue's Pub Dublin, Old O'Donoghue's Facebook page, Andy Irvine, Johnny Moynihan, Finbar Furey, Jerry McCartney, Phelim Drew, Peter Woods, Liz Gillis. O'Donoghue's reunion, Frank McNamara, Neely Mulligan, Tom Mulligan, Paddy Keenan, Niall McDonough, Frank Owens, Tommy Chambers, Brendan Freeman, Pat Sheeran and Ann Diver. Production was by producer Tommy Fagan, editor Donald McCone Love Lurgan, O'Donoghue's recordings Paul Loughran near FM Dublin, technical support Paul Loughran near FM Dublin. Research assistant Ann Diver, narrator Tommy Fagan.
It was August 1962 when I first set foot in O'Donoghue's, a world of music, friends and booze hastening towards me. I never could have guessed as I walked through the door just what the future had in store. A blueprint for my life I saw lying there before me.
This programme was co-funded by Comashún na Man with the television licence fee.